She walked into the studio knowing they'd set the stage against her, but Jasmine Crockett wasn't there to play nice. Across from her sat Karoline Leavitt, polished, poised, and full of media spin, expecting another easy win on live TV. But what followed wasn't just a debate. It was a takedown so sharp the whole room froze. With one sentence, Crockett didn't just silence her opponent. She redefined what it means to fight back with facts, not flash. It was the kind of moment that doesn't just trend. It turns heads in Congress, living rooms, and across every news desk in America. And if you've ever wanted to see someone finally call out the polished lies and stand firm for real truth, this is the video you've been waiting for. Comment where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button, because when someone ends a political career in 8 words flat, you don't just watch, you remember. The email didn't come with fireworks or fanfare. No bold lettering, no all-caps headline demanding attention. Just 6 simple words in the subject line. Live debate request. Leavitt versus Crockett. But for Jasmine Crockett, sitting in her Houston office surrounded by legal case files, handwritten notes from constituents, and a well-worn Bible her grandmother gave her, those 6 words carried more weight than any headline she'd seen that week. She didn't move at first. She just stared at the screen. The room around her was still, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound, beside the faint tick of the analog clock on the wall. She leaned back slightly in her chair, her eyes narrowing as she read the sender. Capital Insider Network, not some fringe platform. This was the channel that older Americans turned to after dinner, the one that still used proper fonts and spoke in full sentences, the one you could watch with your grandkids in the room without shame. Jasmine took a slow breath. She knew what this was, a trap, thinly veiled as tradition. She clicked to open the message. Inside was a cordial invitation, written in the same overly formal tone producers used when they hoped you'd say no, but wanted to keep their hands clean. It was scheduled for Thursday night. Live debate, in studio, Arlington. Opponent, Karoline Leavitt, newly appointed press secretary for the Trump campaign and darling of the post-Gen Z conservative media machine. Karoline had requested it. That part hit like a low note on an organ. Requested it. Leavitt didn't just agree to this debate, she wanted it. That told Jasmine 2 things. First, they thought she was beatable. A foil, maybe. A one-liner waiting to be dunked on by the rising conservative star with a perfectly pressed blazer and a loaded arsenal of talking points. And second, they were underestimating her. Deeply. Deliberately. And that was always their first mistake. Because Jasmine Crockett hadn't spent her career climbing social media charts or curating aesthetic Instagram reels. She had cut her teeth in courtrooms, standing up for Black families who had been broken by a system designed not to rehabilitate, but to crush. She had argued cases where a verdict didn't just determine freedom, it decided whether someone's name would be remembered or erased. She had sat with mothers who had lost sons to unjust policing. She had stared down judges who had tried to diminish her, interrupted her, even smirked as she read case law from memory. She had fought for Medicaid expansion, for fair housing, for dignity, and not in some polished Senate hearing room, but in overcrowded city halls and churches still echoing with gospel choirs. So, no, Jasmine didn't come from makeup artists and Twitter threads, she came from the fire, and she never forgot the smell of smoke. Still, she didn't reply right away. She wanted to think. So she stood, walked to the tall window that overlooked downtown Houston, and let her mind run. She thought about her grandmother's voice, soft but firm, telling her, "Baby, when the enemy sends a summons, you don't panic. You pray, then you show up." She thought about the constituents who had emailed her last week, veterans with VA delays, retirees choosing between medication and groceries, widows too proud to ask for help, but terrified to fall behind on bills. She thought about the kids she saw at that town hall last fall, the ones who lined up to take selfies, but more importantly, the ones who lingered after the cameras were gone to ask about scholarships, climate change, and whether the Constitution still protected people who looked like them. And then she sat back down, cracked her knuckles like she did before every deposition, and typed 3 words into the reply field. "I'll be there." She didn't hit send right away. She stared at it for one last second. Then she clicked. Boom. It was done. Across the country, in an entirely different kind of office, likely one with perfect lighting, beige carpeting, and a publicist on standby, Karoline Leavitt received the acceptance notification with the click of a manicured finger. And somewhere, maybe in her heart, or maybe just in her schedule, she thought she had scored a win. She had no idea she was walking into the most career-defining moment of her life, and not the way she planned it. The producers began working immediately. The studio was booked. The promotional banners were prepped. Karoline was already running mock sessions with campaign staffers, preparing zingers, and writing gotcha questions designed to spin headlines. She had her suit chosen, bold red, always flattering on camera. Her team was confident. Jasmine Crockett would be the perfect foil. Fiery, emotional, easy to caricature. The goal wasn't to inform, it was to dominate the viral moment. But here's the thing about viral moments. They're not controlled. They're earned. And Jasmine was coming not for camera time, but for clarity. The Capital Insider Network studio in Arlington was clean, polished, and painfully bright. The kind of space built for perception over substance. Every corner glowed under LED panels. Every microphone was tuned. Every camera rehearsed. The audience was hand-selected. Retirees, veterans, young professionals, and a sprinkling of undecided voters, recruited through last-minute social media posts. As Jasmine arrived, she looked around the green room, quiet but focused. Her team was small, 2 aides, a legal advisor, no stylists, no crisis managers. Just people who knew that words mattered, and that in rooms like this, people didn't just watch for what was said, but for how it was said. Leavitt's entourage was larger, more polished. They were running optics, briefing with producers, checking mic angles. And yet, for all the movement, there was tension, an undertone of expectancy, like a team praying their playbook wouldn't collapse under pressure. Jasmine sat, legs crossed, binder open. She didn't fidget. She didn't adjust her earpiece. She didn't even look up when a producer came by to offer her last-minute makeup. She politely declined, because Crockett wasn't interested in playing the part. She came to play the truth. And that night, the truth would speak louder than any spin machine. Just moments before the broadcast, she closed her eyes, took a breath, and remembered something her father told her the night before she passed the Texas bar. Walk in like you belong there, and speak like you've already won. She adjusted the microphone on her collar, stood tall, and stepped onto the set. A line was about to be drawn, and history, broadcast live to millions, was about to pick a side. The set was bright, blinding almost. Not the cozy warmth of a community meeting or the humble, fluorescent hum of a town hall. This was television, clinical, calculated, and cruel in its neutrality. The studio was dressed like a courtroom, but it wasn't built for justice. It was built for drama. The American flag in the background wasn't there for patriotism. It was for optics. And under that flag, 2 chairs sat facing each other, center stage for a clash already predicted by headlines, tweets, and algorithms long before either woman opened her mouth. Jasmine Crockett knew this arena. She knew its tricks. The over-rehearsed host. The laugh-track energy of a live audience unsure whether to clap or recoil. The way words were sliced into sound bites before they were even finished. But what she also knew, and what Karoline Leavitt never seemed to grasp, was that real strength wasn't in delivery. It was in depth, in bringing something heavier to the table than a clever line, something older, something earned. Backstage, Jasmine stood quietly, adjusting the cuffs of her navy blazer. She had chosen it deliberately, dark, dignified, commanding without being loud. She had pinned a small brooch to her lapel. It was her mother's, nothing flashy, but a reminder that this wasn't just for TV. This was for the little girls watching from living rooms in Alabama, Ohio, and Mississippi. This was for the veterans with oxygen tanks wheeling up ramps outside of community centers, for the teachers who used their lunch breaks to volunteer at the polls, for the senior citizens clutching Social Security checks that didn't stretch far enough anymore. She wasn't walking into a debate. She was walking into a battlefield that looked like a studio. Across the hall, Karoline Leavitt was doing final touches. Red suit, striking, almost theatrical under the lights, hair immaculately curled, foundation camera ready. Her team buzzed around her with clipboards and earpieces, polishing phrases, prepping one-liners, brushing off any semblance of nerves. Karoline was a showman, a millennial made for media. She was trained to win moments, not arguments. But what she didn't understand, what she never had to understand, was what it felt like to stand in a room where you weren't expected to win, and win anyway. The audience filed in. Some knew who they supported. Others were undecided. Many, especially the older viewers in the front row, just wanted one thing: someone to speak plainly, with honesty, with the kind of respect they remembered from a time when debates were about dignity, not dopamine hits. The host, Sarah Mitchell, a polished middle-aged anchor with the poise of someone who'd long ago stopped asking uncomfortable questions, stepped to the front. Her voice, cool and practiced, addressed the room. Good evening, and welcome to tonight's special edition debate. Joining us are Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas and Karoline Leavitt, press secretary for the Trump campaign. Applause. Polite, measured. Jasmine walked onto the stage with quiet confidence. She nodded to the audience, made eye contact. Karoline followed, smiling wide, waving like a pageant finalist. She took her seat quickly, crossing her legs like she owned the room. Sarah opened. Let's begin with a question on economic policy. Congresswoman Crockett, consumer prices have been rising steadily. The administration argues this is the cost of protecting American jobs through new tariffs. What is your assessment? Jasmine leaned slightly forward. She didn't smile. She didn't blink excessively. She looked directly at Sarah, then at the camera, then at the people in the room. It's a lie, and not even a clever one. Gasps from the audience. Sarah blinked. Karoline's red blazer stiffened with visible discomfort. It's a lie wrapped in flag-waving and buzzwords. Tariffs may sound like strength, but you know what they've really done? They've taxed the American people in silence. Seniors paying more for their prescriptions. Farmers crushed by retaliatory policies. Grandparents trying to stretch fixed incomes watching grocery prices spike. That's not patriotism. That's price gouging, wrapped in nationalism. The room was still. Then Sarah turned, giving Karoline her opening. Karoline, your response? Karoline exhaled as if amused. She gave a small, patronizing smile, the kind that could be taught in media boot camp. Well, Congresswoman Crockett seems to be very comfortable tossing accusations without offering solutions. Polite laughter from a few audience members. What she calls price gouging, we call economic strategy. Jobs are up. Manufacturing is returning. And if the Congresswoman would like to propose a better plan than blaming the Trump administration for global supply chains, I'm sure we'd all love to hear it. Karoline crossed her arms, triumphant, or so she thought. Jasmine didn't lean in. She didn't fire back with speed. She waited. Then she spoke. Karoline, you seem to think politics is a beauty pageant, that if you smile wide enough and talk fast enough, people won't notice you're not saying anything at all. Laughter from the back of the room. Jasmine pressed on. But I didn't come here to dance around you. I came here to speak for the people who don't have a mic. You say jobs are up, but what kind of jobs? Gig work with no benefits? Warehouse shifts with no union protections? You say prices are the cost of protection, so why is it the elderly, not the elite, who are paying the most? Karoline's smirk faltered. You smile in red, Karoline, but the people you're defending are bleeding, and they're doing it alone. Silence. Even Sarah looked momentarily stunned. Then Karoline straightened, her voice more clipped now. I think the Congresswoman is getting emotional. Perhaps we can refocus. That was it. The moment. The word that launched the reckoning. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't snap. She leaned forward. Hands folded. Voice soft. Emotional? No, I'm not emotional. I'm awake. And I'm not here for likes. I'm here for lives. She let the words breathe. You're mistaking focus for emotion because you're used to debating people who are trying to get applause. I'm not here for applause. I'm here because people are dying while you rehearse your next talking point. Boom. The older woman in the front row, white hair, rosary in hand, nodded. The man beside her grunted in agreement. Someone in the back whispered, "She's not wrong." Sarah, now sensing something powerful was building, tried to pivot. Let's talk about leadership. Congresswoman Crockett, many have criticized the administration for its tone. But Jasmine didn't take the bait. You want to talk about tone? She turned to Karoline again. You work for a man who posted insults while Americans died in hospitals without ventilators, who mocks veterans, reporters, even children, and you're worried about my tone? Karoline tried to speak, but Jasmine held up a hand, not rudely, just firmly. No, you had your soundbite. Now here's my truth. She turned to the audience. I don't raise my voice for views. I raise it because silence is complicity, and I won't sit here smiling politely while my people are suffering. The room, so carefully arranged for balance, was tilting. Hearts were leaning. Minds were moving. Jasmine Crockett had not just come prepared. She had come with purpose. And as Karoline Leavitt glanced nervously at her notes, trying to regain control of a stage she thought she'd own, Jasmine Crockett just sat, calm, composed, and completely in command. Because this wasn't a debate anymore. This was a moment, and it belonged to her. Karoline Leavitt sat just a few feet away, still in her red suit, but she might as well have been on a different planet. The audience, once split, now leaned heavily into silence, not out of boredom, but out of weight. Jasmine Crockett's words hadn't just shifted the conversation, they'd cracked something. The air was different now. It wasn't performance, it was confrontation, not of people, but of truths. Karoline tried to smile again, but it came out crooked, like she hadn't yet figured out how to reset the stage now that she wasn't the center of it. Sarah Mitchell, the host, attempted to bring the moment back to equilibrium. Let's move to leadership values. Ms. Leavitt, what do you believe defines leadership in a divided country like ours? Karoline sat a little taller, as if happy to be addressed again. This was her turf. Talking points, principles, preloaded slogans. Leadership, she began, voice calm but forced, is about making hard decisions. It's about standing up for American values, even when it's unpopular. This administration has done that. Our base is strong because our foundation is firm. Jasmine's brow lifted slightly, almost imperceptibly. Karoline continued. While others, she motioned subtly toward Crockett, tweet criticism and chase headlines, we focus on policy that protects America. There it was, a dig veiled in professionalism, a shot wrapped in press-ready packaging. The audience held still. Jasmine didn't flinch, she didn't roll her eyes, she simply turned her head slowly and said, with a voice calm enough to make you lean in, "Did you just accuse me of chasing headlines, Karoline?" Karoline shrugged lightly, faux innocent. "I'm just saying some of us do the work, others do the performance." And then Jasmine leaned forward, not aggressively, but surgically. Her tone didn't rise, it sank. "You think this is a performance?" She placed both hands on the desk. "You think I sit across from grieving mothers in hospital waiting rooms to get a viral moment?" She shook her head slowly. "Let me tell you what a performance is. It's coming out here in a designer suit while seniors are rationing insulin. It's calling yourself a voice for the people when your policies raise rents and cut benefits. It's sitting in a comfortable seat, collecting checks from billionaires while pretending to understand what sacrifice looks like." Karoline shifted, uncomfortable, but still trying to maintain composure. Jasmine didn't let up. "You want to talk leadership? Fine." She paused, letting the room breathe. Leadership is sitting with a Gold Star widow and not looking at your phone. It's holding the hand of a scared immigrant child, not mocking their name. It's visiting a nursing home and not using it for a photo op. It's knowing that when the cameras are off, your decency should still be on. There was a silence in the room that felt like awe, one that spoke louder than any applause, but Jasmine wasn't done. "And you say I chase headlines?" "No, I chase justice. Headlines follow because I say the things people whisper but are too tired to shout." Then came Karoline's last stand, the moment she thought she had the winning hand. She sat straighter, chin tilted up, and spoke. "You're very passionate tonight, Congresswoman, maybe a little emotional." It was meant to be a pinprick, a gendered dig, the kind of phrase designed to deflate confidence. "But Jasmine?" She smiled. Not bitterly, but knowingly, like someone who had been underestimated one too many times, and now welcomed it. And then she spoke the line that would soon headline newsrooms across the country. The line that would be captioned, clipped, and quoted by millions within hours. Emotional? No, Karoline. She leaned in, eyes steady, voice smooth as a gavel drop. "I don't cry when I lose an argument. I end careers. Gasps. A pause that felt like thunder without sound. Then, clapping. Not polite, not hesitant. Full-on, spine-straightening clapping. The kind that starts with one person and spreads like a fire in dry brush. Karoline blinked. She looked around, confused by the reaction. But it was too late. The room was no longer watching a debate. They were witnessing a reckoning. And Jasmine had become the storm. Sarah Mitchell, host for 20 years, looked between the two women with a face that said what everyone was thinking, but wouldn't dare say aloud. Something just shifted. Jasmine sat back in her chair, not triumphant, not smug, but settled, like someone who knew what she'd just done, like a woman who had finally said the sentence she'd been rehearsing for 10 years, but with facts, not fiction. Karoline tried to gather herself. She opened her mouth, closed it, then gave a practiced half smile. Strong words, Congresswoman, but words aren't policy. Jasmine didn't even look at her when she responded. No, but they're where policy begins. And just like that, the air in the room belonged to her. The applause hadn't stopped echoing, but something deeper had settled into the room, a shift, not just in energy, but in power. Karoline Leavitt sat motionless, blinking slower than usual, her red blazer suddenly seeming more like a uniform than a statement. The moment that had just unfolded wasn't part of her plan, and the line Jasmine Crockett delivered, "I don't cry when I lose an argument. I end careers," wasn't just memorable. It was history. And history, as the room was beginning to understand, didn't belong to the most polished. It belonged to the most unshakable. Karoline tried to reset, subtly repositioning her shoulders and lifting her chin as though she could climb her way out of the hole she'd just been dropped into. But the audience's eyes were no longer waiting for her to speak. They were waiting for Jasmine to continue. And Jasmine, she wasn't in a rush. She sat with a quiet stillness that didn't demand attention. It commanded it. Not with theatrics, not with volume, but with presence. The kind that made you forget what you were doing before she started speaking. The kind that made cameras zoom in without a producer telling them to. She didn't need to fill the air with more quotes. She had already altered the atmosphere. But what made it more devastating was that Jasmine wasn't finished. What Karoline thought had been a climax was only the start of the descent. Sarah Mitchell, still recovering from the shift, tried to wrest back control, not with authority, but with desperation thinly veiled as transition. "Let's move on to foreign policy," she said, her voice higher than usual, her eyes flickering toward Karoline like a life raft tossed to a drowning guest. Karoline nodded quickly, eagerly, as if welcoming the change of scenery. She spoke immediately, not with her previous charm, but with the rapid energy of someone trying to run from a fire. "Our administration understands peace through strength. We stand with Israel. We stand against terror. We don't apologize for putting America first," she said, her sentences firing like practiced bullets from a memorized script. But the problem was, the room no longer believed her bullets had weight. She was performing, and the audience could tell. Jasmine waited until Karoline finished, then didn't respond immediately. She just looked at her, then looked at Sarah, then looked at the camera. She took a breath, not to collect herself, but to let the silence marinate. And then she said something that didn't sound rehearsed because it wasn't. "You keep saying we," she said quietly, "but you don't mean the American people. You mean the donors. You mean the party. You mean the small circle of insulated decision-makers who write policies that never touch their own lives." She leaned forward, not in attack, but in certainty. "Karoline, what do you know about strength? Not from a podium, not from a press release. I'm talking about real strength. Like a military wife who watches her husband deploy for the 4th time and still volunteers at the food pantry. Like a nurse who comes home after a double shift to care for her aging mother and 2 grandkids. You want to talk about America first? That's America, not sound bites. Not handshakes with lobbyists. It's people who sacrifice every day with no camera pointed at them. And they're tired of being told their pain is strategy." The audience didn't clap this time. They couldn't. Because when truth hits hard enough, it doesn't trigger noise. It triggers silence. Sarah's voice wavered slightly as she tried again. Congresswoman Crockett, that's a strong emotional appeal, but what about results? Jasmine turned slowly. You want results? She asked. Fine, let me give you one. I introduced a bill last year to cap insulin at $35. Know what happened? It died in committee because the pharmaceutical lobby that cuts checks to your party told Congress it would hurt innovation. Want another one? I tried to increase VA benefits in my district. Blocked. You know who voted against it? The same people who wear flag pins but can't name a single base outside their state. Her voice didn't rise, but her words landed harder with each sentence. Results? My constituents don't need another promise. They need someone who will stand up in rooms like this, not bow their head and repeat a line. Karoline exhaled through her nose, searching for footing. Her media team backstage was likely scrambling, texting notes, urging her to pivot or insert a practiced retort. She adjusted her seat again. You've made your position clear, she said, her voice now tight. But this administration has made it clear too. We stand for free speech, economic liberty, and law and order. Unlike the Congresswoman, we don't believe America is broken. And Jasmine? She didn't smile. She didn't mock. She nodded slowly and replied, You're right. I don't believe America is broken. I believe it's bruised. And every time someone like you defends the people throwing the punches, the bruises deepen. Now there was noise. Someone in the audience let out a quiet, damn. Another person said, that's it, under their breath. Sarah Mitchell looked down at her notes, unsure where to steer the moment, but she knew something had happened. Karoline, now visibly frustrated, crossed her arms again, lips pressed so tightly together the color drained from them. Jasmine remained still, steady. Then Sarah asked the question everyone had anticipated, but Karoline feared. Karoline, do you think Congresswoman Crockett is wrong? Karoline jumped at the chance. I think she's theatrical, she said. She's turning this into an audition, not a debate. Jasmine didn't even blink. Karoline, I already have a job, she said. I came here because while you chase content, I chase convictions. The room responded with murmurs, nods, the kind of subtle reactions that speak volumes on a studio floor. The debate was no longer even. The rhythm was gone. Karoline was answering questions. Jasmine was answering the country. Sarah Mitchell's voice cracked slightly as she moved to wrap the segment. We're almost out of time, she said. Final thoughts? Jasmine leaned in one last time. I don't want applause. I don't want a viral clip. I want one person watching at home, maybe a widow, maybe a student, maybe a retiree with a fixed income, to know they're not alone. That somebody in power still tells the truth, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's unpopular. And that starts with not letting this room lie to them anymore. And with that, Jasmine Crockett didn't just end the conversation, she ended the performance. The studio lights stayed the same, but the air had changed. Not because someone raised their voice, but because someone told the truth, and didn't blink while doing it. The final words of Jasmine Crockett's response still echoed in the minds of the audience. She hadn't asked for validation. She hadn't even looked for applause. She had aimed for something deeper, awareness, conviction. That rare, sharp silence that cuts through the noise and leaves everyone, on both sides, remembering where they were when they heard it. Karoline Leavitt looked smaller now, not in size, but in presence. The once confident press secretary had spent the night delivering lines like a script supervisor, but now sat as if someone had torn out the final page. She adjusted her mic nervously, searching the room for support, but the camera wasn't on her anymore. It was locked on Jasmine. Not because of lighting, but because she had become the light. Sarah Mitchell, realizing they were approaching the close of the segment, glanced at her producer, then back at the audience. There was no need to hype the ending. It had already arrived. The studio's silence wasn't dead. It was charged, like the pause after a sermon before the altar call. The moment wasn't about debate anymore. It was about aftermath. The fallout from a sentence that had undone months of messaging in one breath. I don't cry when I lose an argument. I end careers. And the career in question, Karoline's, had already begun to tremble under the weight of that truth. But Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't deliver a victory lap. She didn't have to. Instead, she turned to the audience, that small group of undecided voters and longtime watchers who had come expecting theater and gotten testimony. "I want to say something to the people watching," she said calmly, looking straight into the camera. "Not the pundits, not the donors, not the party strategists. You, the ones who feel like no one's speaking for you anymore." Her voice softened. "But I see you. I see the 72-year-old grandmother who called my office last week, crying because her insulin cost more than her rent. I see the veteran who voted Republican all his life and told me he's done because nobody talks to him. Just add him. I see the teacher nearing retirement who's using her own savings to buy her students lunch because the budget got cut again." She paused, not for effect, but for breath. "I didn't come here to argue. I came here to remind you that truth still matters, that it doesn't have to be flashy or dressed up or sponsored. It just needs to be spoken with courage. And tonight, I hope I've done that." She sat back, her hands resting on the table. And that was it, the final word. But it wasn't a mic drop. It was a mirror, and America was looking at itself in it. Karoline tried to respond. She really did. She shifted forward and opened her mouth, but whatever she had rehearsed didn't fit anymore. The script was gone. The room no longer had space for spin. She managed a single line, one last desperate attempt to reclaim her footing. "Well, I think the American people can decide what matters most." Jasmine didn't even turn her head. She simply replied, "They just did." Datschön. The audience exhaled collectively, the kind of breath you don't know you're holding until it's released. The credits rolled, the music played. Sarah Mitchell wrapped up with practiced professionalism, but even her closing felt subdued. She knew what had happened. So did the crew, the cameramen, the editors, the producers backstage texting their contacts at the network. They knew what they had just captured. It wasn't a debate, it was a reckoning, and it was about to go viral. The clip hit Twitter within 23 minutes. Jasmine Crockett, steady and firm, delivering her now legendary line, with Karoline frozen across from her, blinking as though she'd just been hit by something she didn't see coming. Within 2 hours, Cheshire Crockett 2026 trended. By morning, every major news outlet had run the clip. MSNBC opened with it. Fox News reluctantly acknowledged it. CNN ran a full segment titled, "The One Sentence That Shut Down the Debate." TikTok flooded with reenactments. YouTube compilations dissected it frame by frame. But it wasn't just media, it was the people. Older viewers who had turned on Capitol Insider, expecting just another political exchange, found themselves gripped by something they hadn't seen in years: authenticity. Emails poured into Crockett's office. Letters, donations, testimonials. One read, "I'm 78, voted Republican for 50 years. But I've never heard someone speak for me like you did. I cried. Thank you." Even critics had to admit it. Karoline Leavitt's team issued a brief press release calling the debate spirited and an important exchange of ideas. It read like a resignation note dressed in public relations clothing. 2 nights later, at a senior center in Cincinnati, a retired teacher named Helen replayed the clip for her bridge group. They watched quietly. One of them had a son who couldn't afford heart medication. Another's daughter had been laid off from a rural health clinic due to cuts in federal support. When the clip ended, Helen said, "She didn't blink. That's how I know she meant it." And no one disagreed, because when you're 70 and have lived through Nixon, Reagan, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, when you've seen it all, you learn to spot the difference between those who show up and those who show off. And Jasmine Crockett? She had shown up, not for a party, but for a people. To those who watched this unfold and felt something shift, this is your moment too. Politics isn't always about who wins a seat. It's about who wins the truth, who protects it, who defends it when it's easiest to walk away. Jasmine Crockett didn't deliver a moment. She delivered a memory. And memories like that don't fade. They ignite. If you believe debates should be more than staged noise, if you believe our leaders should speak with us, not at us, if you believe in courage that doesn't need shouting, then subscribe, share this video, and comment below, because your voice belongs here. The truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs someone brave enough to say it, and someone wise enough to listen.